Hi everyone. I stayed at Ramanasramam recently for 3 days and I spent a lot of that time reading this book. This is a person called Suri Nagamma, who was a Telugu lady. This is her autobiography. Her original autobiography is in Telugu. This one is the translated version in English. I've gone through these pages filled with a slew of emotions: agitation, happiness, sorrow, frustration. It's been a gripping tale. I've read many books of Ramana Maharshi and I have not seen his death being detailed out. In this video, I want to share some of these details. At the end of the video, we will look at one question that I have been pondering on since then. I recently put up my Kartikai Deepam Girivalam vlog, which was an intense 24-hour long pilgrimage. And after the pilgrimage, I couldn't really walk or exert much due to the fatigue. And that was fine because I had 3 days to spend at Ramanasramam, which was anyway a focal point of my yatra. I felt like reading a book. And Ramanasramam, you may not be aware, but they have an amazing library. Daily they have a reading session. Once it happens in Tamil and once in English. So I would say there is a general reading kind of a vibe in the place, and so it was very natural for me to want to read something. And that's when I headed to the bookstore. I picked up this book and I remembered that earlier when I had come across it, I was kind of avoiding it for a reason. But this time it felt right to read it. Intro paragraph of this book itself mentions that in the Telugu version, which was written directly by Suri Nagamma, there were some very personal and controversial details which they have chosen to remove from the English version. And so it seemed like this book was a little bit next level. Maybe that is why I was avoiding it earlier. But as I mentioned, once I took it up this time, it was such a gripping tale. I literally read it out within a day. So let us look at a short introduction of Suri Nagamma. She lost her father when she was 4, her mother when she was 10, and her husband when she was 12. Because of all of these calamities, she was completely drowned into depression and she developed a lot of health problems. She did not leave her house for a lot of years, it seems, when she did not even see the sun for a very long period of time. And somehow in that, you can say, solitary confinement of thoughts, she just found some 2-3 religious books in the room and she kept reading those, and that's when her tendencies towards spirituality and religion started. And eventually she found a way to Ramana Maharshi. As we read this book, we realize how she grew as a person around Ramana Maharshi, with his tender care and affection towards her. In fact, Ramana himself seems to have encouraged her to do a lot of this writing, do a lot of Telugu translations. This story was very relatable for me. One was because this was a female sadhaka, and what I have been realizing over time is that a lot of these stories that we read, movies that we watch around spirituality, they are usually focusing on the men. If they are showing the story of a monk, 85% of the time it is a male monk. And I've been realizing that the story of a woman monk may actually be very different, and I wouldn't know because there's barely even books or movies from them about them. So this being from a female sadhaka was really relevant for me. And the other thing that I could really resonate with was that she was a writer, because I am also a writer, and of course now the video format as well. So in general, this is a great book to read, but let's get into the details about Ramana Maharshi's death. So basically it starts with a chapter called Tumor on page 80, and the entire section goes on till 131, so it's like a 50-page section. So she says at the beginning of 1949 is when a small tumor appeared above Bhagwan's left elbow. So you might be knowing that Ramana Maharshi's devotees called him Bhagwan, and that he was ill with cancer for a very long time, and then finally he took Nirvana. So this cancer tumor appeared at the beginning of 1949. Suri Nagamma describes the very initial conversation, goes like this. Afraid of serious consequences, the ashram doctor Shankar Rao and a retired surgeon of repute Srinivas Rao felt that an operation was necessary. They suggested the idea to Bhagwan. The master said, "It does not give me any pain. Let it be as it is. Why meddle with it?" As the tumor kept growing, the doctors got worried and told Bhagwan, this is growing in size daily, it has to be removed by an operation. He replied, let it grow, what does it matter to me, why meddle with it? The trouble will be over if the tumor is removed immediately, said the doctors. With a slight tilt of his head, Bhagwan said, oh, will it be over? And assumed silence. As the Sarvadhikari was in Madras for 3 weeks, the doctors awaited his return. On his return, they obtained his permission and performed the operation on Feb 9th. So, this first part pretty much sets the tone for the whole thing, because it seems that the doctors and Bhagwan keep having a discussion, and Bhagwan does not seem interested in going through an operation. However, the Sarvadhikari is basically the person who was in charge of running the entire ashram. So I was so surprised that he did not seem to be very supportive of the operation, but when the Sarvadhikari gave the permission and the operation was performed, Bhagwan tried to maintain the normal going-ons in the ashram and participating in every way he used to do earlier. But he started looking tired after this operation was conducted. But when anyone asked him, he would just make light of the matter. He would say stuff like, I'm wearing a bracelet, or a lingam is born, or some such thing. And it seems a lot of times he passed remarks like, if anybody had a tumor on the head or neck, he would say that, see what they have, very large tumors like ours, but they have not touched them. Likewise, this will be absolutely harmless if left alone, but you do not leave it alone. So he seems to have said very clearly on multiple occasions that the tumor should not have been removed by operation. Again, by mid-March, the place where the tumor had been removed by the operation, again a new growth started. So there is one set of discussion where Nagamma is trying to coax him to opt for a different treatment. And it goes like this. Nagamma, why not try some indigenous medicine? Bhagwan, yes, that can be done, but then all of them say they must operate. What to do? Nagamma, some time ago a child had a similar tumor which grew again after operation. An Ayurvedic doctor who was consulted had it bandaged with the milk exudation of the fig tree and the tumor healed. Why not try that method? After all, is there any medicine that Bhagwan doesn't know? If that does not work, then an operation could be considered. I have refrained from making such a suggestion all this time, but now that another operation is being contemplated, I venture to speak out. Bhagwan, yes, fig milk is good, but who will heed such advice? Go and tell the people in the office. It will take another 10 days for the doctors to come. This treatment may be tried in the meantime. After this, and some efforts from Nagamma, a person called Krishna Bhikshu procured some Ayurvedic plasters for the wound, and they started trying out on Bhagwan. However, the doctors decided to expedite their operation. Maybe they found it was a major emergency they felt or something. And within a couple of days itself, the doctor said they are coming tomorrow itself and just doing the operation. They suggested to the doctor that let the Ayurveda treatment at least continue for some days because it has anyway already started. But the doctors thought it was very imperative to do the operation. So by end of March, a second operation was conducted, and the wound kept bleeding. It did not heal at all. And at least the second operation was performed without anesthesia, as what is written here. You can imagine the plight of the devotees. Even I'm feeling anxious just sitting and reading all this. And then there was another lady who came into the ashram, and she had a huge tumor on the head, which had very similar properties to Bhagwan's tumor. And those Ayurvedic medicines that he was taking earlier, he basically said, why let it go waste? This lady can use it. And what the book goes on to say is that lady did apply those medicines and eventually her tumor disappeared. Often they are mentioning cases where Ayurvedic doctors are coming and saying that they could have easily cured it. It seems even Ramana Maharshi's mother, who stayed with him on the hill for many years, she herself had been curing tumors of a similar kind with natural remedies. So I do not know why the doctors absolutely paid no attention to all of this, and even the office people did not seem to be paying heed to these pieces of information. And then, of course, the tumor reappeared in the wound after the second operation also. And his wound kept bleeding. So it was a very serious matter. On April 30th, the doctors came in and gave him some blood transfusion. And the doctors had suggested to amputate the arm completely. But at that point, a lot of the devotees have got into very heated discussions. A lot of devotees were completely against such a course of action, and finally that faction won. So during this time, the doctors were also giving him radium needles, and for that also Ramana Maharshi mentions somewhere here that those needles also suppressed it for some time, but then that just made the whole tumor situation much worse because it came back. He's saying it is just like disturbing a cobra in its natural habitat. Will it not hiss? All this time the devotees are getting more and more hopeless and feeling miserable, and they are pleading to Bhagwan that he should cure himself, because obviously we would think any gnani will be able to do that, but the whole point that comes across in these pages is that the gnani doesn't have a desire. That is why he is a gnani. And so there was a Dr. Ananta Narayana Rao who had been massaging Bhagwan's legs with ointment every night. And so Nagamma kept going and checking with him about Bhagwan's conditions after these operations. And so what this doctor says is that Bhagwan's health is at present slightly better, but then Bhagwan must have the desire for the tumor to heal up. Last night when I went for the massage, he himself expressed certain sentiments, and that troubled me a great deal. He said that the gnani always looks forward to the time when his bodily karma comes to an end. It is like a person bearing a very heavy load on his head for a fee and toiling under it, while eagerly looking forward to reach his destination. As soon as he arrives, he unloads himself and heaves a sigh of relief, takes rest. With that, his job will have been completed. In the same manner, the gnani, as soon as his work is over, leaves the body and goes away. That is what Bhagwan told me. I never spoke one word. I merely sat there with bowed head. It seems Ramana Maharshi had said that there must be something called mind to create a desire, but there is no such thing, he said. How then can a desire be got? That which is non-existent, how can it be secured, developed and retained? So this was basically the situation, and the tumor basically just kept growing larger, which had, of course, even after second operation it regrew, and the wound kept bleeding profusely, and the doctors kept asking him to amputate his arm. On July 25th, there was a highly qualified allopathic physician called Dr. Guruswami Mudaliar. He basically came and said that while this tumor should not have been removed in the first place, now that it had been done and the wound was in such a bad condition, these kind of random Ayurvedic treatments should not be done. So again, the care of the wound went back to the doctors. But the amazing thing is, this Dr. Guruswami, so he gave some homeopathic medicine and he said that Suri Namaskar should be performed. I don't know what is exactly the Suri Namaskar. I don't know if this is the yoga practice or is it some other kind of because then they are saying a Pandit was accordingly appointed and he began to do the Namaskarams from then on at the Veda Pathshala. So the point was, I find it very surprising because the doctor comes and says the Ayurvedic treatment is no good, but then he gives homeopathy and he talks about doing another ritual. I mean, it's not even allopathy, and surely if a Surya Namaskar would cure, Ramana Maharshi himself would have known. So yeah, it's just... So anyway, then all of the devotees started doing a lot of stuff, like some of them started doing Girivalams around Arunachalam, some people started doing Surya Namaskaram on their own. And then on 31st July, again the doctors met and they basically did another operation on 7th of August. So that I was really sad about, because obviously it wasn't working, and this Dr. Guruswami even agreed that the earlier operation was a mistake, but they've decided to operate again. But the important thing to understand also is that the doctors were so concerned, and even the Sarvadhikaris and all the office people were so concerned about Ramana Maharshi's health that they actually got with the government's permission, X-ray and other electrical equipment for the operation were transported from the Royapeta Hospital of Madras in a lorry. Everything else necessary was brought in the cars of the doctors. A total of 30 medical men came with the doctor. This was Dr. Raghavachari, who was the chief surgeon. And there was never an occasion earlier when the equipment of a government hospital had thus been permitted to be taken out of the hospital premises. Moreover, no charge was levied for all of this stuff by the government, and just the actual expense of the transportation was borne by some devotee. As it happened, amongst the number of devotees at this time was one engineer called Mr. Narayan Rao. In one of the previous operations, there was a sudden power cut. So in the middle of the operation, the electricity switched off. And then the rest of the operations had to be done in candles and lamps and torch lights. So Narayan Rao remembered this, and he actually called the electricity department and to Mettur and arranged for uninterrupted power supply for the duration of this operation. So you see, so many huge government level activities were done just to have this operation to be conducted. So while in a certain way this narrative makes us feel so frustrated that they are just pushing Ramana down a wrong path of treatment, but at the same time they were willing to do so much because they obviously believed that was the right treatment. So once the operation was conducted, they insisted that Bhagwan stays in the hospital and takes as much rest as possible. But as soon as the doctors and folks left, Bhagwan came walking to the new hall saying that if he stayed in the hospital, devotees would be inconvenienced, as also the patients coming for treatment. And so Ramana Maharshi just wanted to keep being as much available to the devotees as possible. But his body was deteriorating, there was nothing to be done. So slowly this book also shows how his, for example, he could not eat in the, the common dining hall with the devotees anymore. So he has to start eating on his own. And after that in November, again the tumor showed up again, and it was higher up in the arm, and everybody realized that this has now entered the full body. Earlier, the tumor that kept coming again and again had actually not penetrated the entire system. It was still curtailed to that area. But once this new growth happened in November, he was also so keen to not cause inconvenience or pain to anyone. For example, Suri Nagamma went for a few days out of town for some work, and when she came back, she went and saw Ramana, and she found that his body was all reddish and full of blisters. With great concern, I asked him, "What is the matter?" He replied, "I do not know. It has happened. What am I to say about it?" Looking around, she found electric heaters on either side close by. She knew that Ramana Maharshi's body was allergic even to the breeze of an electric fan. It was obvious the electric heaters would not suit him. So she supposed that the skin eruption was due to them. However, she could not say anything right away, and as sitting in the hall was prohibited, she returned home. As it happened, the same electrical engineer, Mr. Narayan Rao, had come for the darshan that day, and he met Suri Nagamma, and she asked him about the matter, and he suggested that there can be a cloth curtain between Ramana Maharshi and the electric heater to avoid these kind of blisters on his body. So he then went and gave his opinion to the office, and the office immediately removed the heaters and replaced them with the charcoal stove. And so this news of this incident spread to all the devotees, and one of the old devotees approached Bhagwan and asked him why he did not object to the electric heaters if they made him uncomfortable. So Ramana Maharshi replied, "I never worried. In the case of the usual charcoal stove, you must fill it with charcoal and fan it. The ash that is generated is carried all over the hall. The electric heaters, on the other hand, do not require all that attention and do not make the place dirty. So they were substituted. Why should I object to them?" "But then your skin was getting scorched," said the devotee. "What of that? It may be so," said Ramana. Will they not feel offended if I object to a thing which they think is good to myself? Moreover, it is true that this new hall gets spoiled by spilt ash, so I kept quiet. Now that Narayan Rao says that they should not be used, I have got my charcoal stove back. There are some other incidents which are on the same lines, and that's when a certain quality keeps coming out, which is actually very surprising for me, because even if it was causing so much pain, like he had blisters all over his body, he will not say anything just because it is causing small inconvenience to his devotees. And as we read more and more, even with the operations, it seems to be the same thing. Like when that whole team of people were insisting, he didn't want to go against them. They'll feel bad. They'll feel slighted, like their opinions were not valued by Ramana. So anyway, as I mentioned, the tumor came up higher up in the body, and our operation was performed on November 19th. So this was the last operation, and so totally there were 4 operations that were conducted. In February of 1950, again the tumor reappeared, and even the doctors gave up. They said there's nothing that even we can do anymore, and they said that Ramana doesn't have many days to live. In the end part of February, Ayurvedic doctor from Kerala called the Moose. I have never heard this term, but it seems it's like an expert Ayurvedic doctor from Kerala was given charge of taking care of this. But it had little bit of improvement on the wound, but eventually even that didn't really work out. And by the time Ramana was also having vomiting, and his body had deteriorated a lot. So Nagamma Akka was actually having interactions with Bhagwan almost until the last day, because she had these little things she would do for Ramana, and she continued doing them. Like for example, when Ugadi came, which was the March 19th of that year, she offered him some new clothes and things like that, like clothes in the sense what he used to only have a towel and a small cloth he wore on his waist, which they are calling as kaupinam. So she offered those, and at the time she has written about a few lines Ramana spoke to her, which were of a lot of significance. And on April 13th was kind of the last day, which Nagamma describes, and till the last moment, Ramana Maharshi's main goal seemed to be to give darshan to all the devotees, basically to be there for all the devotees who came to the ashram. And even on that day, he could not even open his eyes, but he still just remained available to all the people coming in. And almost from morning till night till 7 p.m. And obviously, everybody would have, started realizing that his health is failing. So more and more devotees would be coming in just to get the last darshan. And there was a shift in the devotees of the ashram. Till recently, we have all been praying to Bhagwan to remain in this body for our sake. His present condition is so terrible that we have decided not to make such a prayer anymore. Unless all of us desist from such prayers, the life of this avatar may not come to an end. Please think it over. This is what someone said to Suri Nagamma, and she was shocked. But then she observed Bhagwan through this entire day, and finally even she had this great change that came over her own mind. And she said to herself, all these days I have been praying to you not to go away leaving us desolate. But now I pray no more to that effect. We cannot bear to see the present condition of your body anymore. You need not bear this burden for our sake. And that's pretty much it. This book actually mentions April 13th to be the last day. I feel that maybe some kind of a typo, maybe somewhere a line has been skipped or something, because the official date given for Ramana Maharshi's Nirvana is April 14th. And at one point he sat up, his attendants had to help him to sit up properly, and he just stopped breathing at one point. And then what they are saying is, while the close devotees were all there, and they were, because they knew, this won't last much, and they were chanting and singing. The people which were further away, they said they saw a star go from Ramanasramam to the top of Arunachalam mountain. And the moment they saw that kind of a starlight happen, they all ran towards the ashram because they knew something had happened and he had passed away. And the question that I kept pondering on while I was reading this is that when we have a spiritual guru that is alive, how are the people who are right around him, like, they're helping him manage the organization, do a lot of his work, how are they supposed to treat his words? Like in practical day-to-day matters, when the guru says something, is it okay for the people around him to oppose him, to discuss things out, to even reject some of his thoughts and ideas? That's the one I've been pondering on, and especially something as intimate as a health problem that the guru is facing, then can the treatment methods, can it really be pushed by someone else? It's just a very it's actually, this particular matter has happened in our families also, because a lot of the older generation of people have always been of the opinion that they don't want to go for allopathic treatments at all. And it's actually happened in the family where and at the time I actually pushed for the allopathic treatment. I don't know, is this okay or is it not okay? I do not know. And this in this whole case of Ramana Maharshi, what I'm seeing from this whole book, it's not just that people are coaxing him to do something different, or that they are vehemently opposing him, but it's the fact that Ramana is so considerate about not, the devotee should not feel slighted. If a devotee is doing something with great love to help Bhagwan, he doesn't want to go against that. He wants to respect that person's emotions, and even if that treatment is actually very harmful to him, he's just taking it. I mean, I don't know, so yeah, this is the story of Suri Nagamma and intimate details about Ramana Maharshi's death.